Hello, everyone, and welcome to 6 Feet Ahead. Today, we're joined by Lanae Strovers, an Iowa-based funeral director and the lead instructor for the NFDA's Arranger Training Program. Lanae is part of a new generation reshaping the funeral profession with empathy, creativity, and innovation. She's been nationally recognized for her work honoring unclaimed veterans with proper burials, and her mission has been featured by Axios and Our American Stories. In a field long dominated by tradition, Lanae is helping to lead the industry into the future. Lanae, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Awesome. You caught our attention when we saw recently you contributed to a New York Times article where innovations were highlighted in the funeral profession. And I would love it if you could share with the audience how you began your career in funeral services, since I know that's intimately tied into how you're actually doing things today.
Sure. So I came into funeral service somewhat as an accident. I had never thought, oh, I want to be in funeral service. I have no family members in funeral service. Even my experience going to funerals growing up was pretty slim, great grandparents. But other than that, that just never crossed my mind. Oh, I want to be in funeral service. I was a single mom. I was bartending. And I had a really good friend who died, and the circumstances of his death were different. He was found in a vehicle and there was a fire. And so because of that, it took 3 months to get his remains released from the medical examiner's office. And for that 3 month time period, we were all sitting there, what do we do? Because there wasn't a funeral, there wasn't a memorial service. We knew it was him, even though it was taking some time to identify him legally. It was just this really weird time of our lives. So we go back to work, right? Like we just keep doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then 3 months later, they finally released his remains and we had a funeral. And we were so needing that. Like, I don't think people understand how much you need that closure until you've not been afforded that opportunity. We're like, okay, here's this funeral. We need this. Hopefully, this will really help us get that closure, move on what we are needing. And we went to the funeral home for the visitation in the evening. And it was a small town, but we walk in and there just wasn't anything about him. Honestly, we thought we went to the wrong funeral home because we're like, there's like old people music playing, and there was like a few pictures of him, and the urn was just like, now I know is just a minimum black urn. There just wasn't anything about him. I'm like, this is weird, but you know what? Small town vibe, whatever. So the next day we had his funeral service, which was at a church, and nobody got up to talk about him. They didn't read his obituary. It was like going to a Sunday church service, which I grew up religious, so I'm like, okay, but there's always like a personal element, and there was nothing at all. Like they didn't talk about him. They didn't talk about his life. And I was just, I don't know if I can say this, but I was pissed. I was
Yeah.
really angry. And so I did the most natural thing, and I went home and I started drinking wine and started Googling how to be a funeral director. And after about two classes, I was like, this looks like a good idea. I can do this. And so I applied to mortuary school after maybe being under the influence a little bit. And then the next day, get all these emails back saying, "Hey, the classes start in 2 weeks. You've been accepted. You need these credits, whatever." And I was like, woke up the next day, what did I do? But I just thought, I'm not really doing anything. Let's try it. So called my parents and I said, "Hey, can you guys help out with Jaden? I think I'm going to go back to school full time," and pretty much didn't look back. But that reason of getting into it is what's propelled my entire career, because I've always made very sure that when the family walks into that room, they know that room was specifically set up for that person, and that we talk about who that person was. And the other thing that I think is really important is when we talk about my friend Jeffrey, we found out later that the funeral home and the church didn't agree with his lifestyle. And because Jeffrey was gay and lived an alternative lifestyle, they weren't allowed to talk about him. And that's not our job as funeral directors to dictate what families can and cannot celebrate about their person.
Absolutely. Wow. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think that story is amazing. I think that it really speaks volumes about a lot of things. But you're known for creating highly personalized funerals, right?
Mhm.
So from turning a funeral home into a baseball field or a gaming room to organizing a runway show. Now let's talk a little bit about that process, right? Like these are very unique touches. So how do you get to that inspiration?
So I don't sleep well. So most of these come to me at 2 a.m., to be very honest with you. I wish I could say it's this profound process of what I do, but it truly is. I'll mull over a couple of different things. I know I'm trying to come up with something creative for the families, but usually all of a sudden just an idea will pop in my head, then I'll formulate it. But it starts with the process of, okay, what can I do that's not just the urn there or the casket there, the folders, the song, the basics, the what we provide as funeral service. Take that and what can I do a step ahead? And sometimes it is these really big things, right? And that's where my coworkers at the funeral home are like, oh my God, Lanae, what are you doing now? Usually, if they have that response, I know I'm on the right track of what I want to do. But sometimes it's simple stuff too. It's just elevating the experience for the families. And it's not, I say, it's not rocket science. It's not hard. It's just taking the time to think about what was really important to this person, what are my talents, and what are my team's talents, and what can we put together, maybe thinking outside the box for this family.
So would you say that this may start at the point like when you're thinking about the obituary?
Yeah. So when I'm sitting down meeting with a family, that's one of the first things I do when I meet with a family is I introduce myself, give them the GPL, got to be in my FTC role. And then what I'll do is I'll have each person in the room introduce themselves, what their relationship to the deceased is, and then have them tell me one important fact about the deceased that they think I should know. And usually that's really personal things. It's dad loved the Chicago Cubs, or teaching was my mom's life, and just in that first 10 minutes, I know more about that person just from having them tell me what were those important things. And that's really the starting point for me, and I think is a great way to open your arrangement conference.
That's great. How do families typically respond to this?
So I don't ever do the huge things without somewhat getting the family's permission. I might not tell them everything so that they know what we're doing. But for example, the baseball field, I had reached out to the wife and I said, "Hey, I've got this idea. It's a little bit thinking outside the box, so I want your thoughts on it. What do you think?" I have never had a family be upset about it. Usually it's just this huge sigh of relief because I also, in these goals, try and make the funeral home not look like a funeral home, which funeral homes are scary for people. And so if we can make that room not be so scary and more comfortable for that family when they're there celebrating their person.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So would you say that is that baseball funeral that you did, is that your favorite personalized service and the impact it had, or would you have another one that comes to mind?
I don't know if I want to say a favorite one, but probably the one that has been most impactful on the community that I've had is where we thought outside the box is we had three girls. They were sisters, very young, who all died in the same car accident. And I knew that most of the people coming to the funeral home, it was probably going to be their first experience with a funeral. They were going to be kindergarten through middle school age, and were probably very scared about what they were going to see or what they were going to experience. And so, what we did is we teamed up with the school. So, I went and spoke to the school ahead of time, worked really hard with the teachers, the guidance counselors to talk to the students about what was going to happen ahead of time. And then at the funeral home itself, we turned the lights up super bright, which most funeral directors like, ah, not turn the lights on. It's supposed to be dim and low, but turn the lights up. And then we had activity tables throughout the funeral home. So we had crafts, we had cookie decorating stations, bracelet making stations. We had volunteers from the school that came there, so it was familiar faces. We had all these different things. So it wasn't a traditional visitation. It was very much like an activity session, and the girls' caskets happened to be there, and then we had little baskets that they could put their notes and crafts in to the girls. And so even though it wasn't like, oh, turning the funeral home into something different, it was turning the funeral home into a safe space for the younger children. And through the years since that has happened, I've had so many people in public that have come up to me and said, "Hey, I was there with my child. Thank you for creating a safe space. Thank you for not making the funeral home a scary place for my child." And even the school was like, we had such a good conversations with the kids after that because they felt so comfortable at the funeral home being able to honor their friends. So that's probably, I don't like the word favorite for that, but definitely the most impactful one.
Definitely, definitely. And it sounds like it gives someone at that age the ability to have an idea of what's happening, give them closure, which has to be something extremely difficult. If it's done the more traditional way, I would imagine that it's definitely not going to be as positive for them, and that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives. So,
Mm. Yeah.
kudos to you on that. That's amazing. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So,
Yeah.
as a first generation funeral director, did you face any challenges entering an industry that is normally family run? Most of the funeral
Mhm.
directors I speak to are funeral home owners. They're like, yeah, this belongs to my dad, my grandfather. So here you are, first generation, you're coming into this. And this is an industry that's traditionally male, right? Now I
Mhm.
know that right now we're seeing a huge influx of women, which actually makes complete sense. But I'm
Why
just
did it take
curious.
so long?
Yeah, I know. But I am curious, any challenges that you faced and how did you probably did, right?
Yeah, I remember that first day. So I went to in-school mortuary classes, which I'm a huge proponent for. I love in person. But I remember the first day, like we're going around the room and everybody's talking about why do you want to be a funeral director? And again, everybody was like, my dad's a funeral director, it runs in the family. And I'm sitting here thinking like, this is not who I am at all. I am not fitting the mold of everybody else that's sitting here. And I didn't have a job at the funeral home when I started mortuary school. Almost every one of the other students, either they're working for their parents or had a connection. And it was hard. And I look back like, because you had to have a funeral home. Once you were at a certain point in your class, you had to have a funeral home that would say you can do things at the funeral home. And I went to multiple funeral homes in the Des Moines area, and they all were like, nope, nope. Which now is fun because now I've gone back to them and said, see, you should have hired me when you had the
Oh,
chance. But we're all on good terms, so just fun.
that's good.
But I didn't have any experience. I didn't have my name wasn't out there, and I'm just some random person off the street. So it was really difficult to get my foot in the door with nothing backing me. And so I really had to start. I finally found a funeral home, and it's the same funeral home I'm at now that gave me the chance, and I did it. I would sit there overnights and say, I want to help go on calls. I want to do embalmings. I want to do removals. I want to sit in on families. And it was putting in the time and effort, which was really difficult. I had a family and my son, and then working and school and all of that. But I had to prove that I was worth the hire. And I think that's something that our mortuary students are struggling with a little bit right now is proving the hire.
Do you feel like they're struggling with it once they're hired, or just that they're not able to get hired?
They're not able to get hired. They're not able
Mm.
to get that foot in the door. And it's hard. There's this shortage of funeral directors, but it's also scary to hire somebody that has no experience or no connection to death care. But yeah, take a chance on them. But it's just interesting watching it as somebody that had to go through that path by myself as well.
How long have you been doing it for?
About 15 years.
And okay, in these 15 years, what are like some of the major changes that you've observed in the profession?
We all have seen funerals change. So, meeting with the families, obviously, cremation is changing,
Oh
but
yeah.
seeing so much more of, oh, I can do it myself. I'll do it on my own, or I'm not going to have anything. I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that we're starting slowly to come back from that. The generation that is dying now or that has been dying in the last 10 years didn't want to fuss. Don't make a fuss about it when I die. I want to keep it simple. A lot of that generation didn't have life insurance. We don't talk about things. But now the people that we're starting to sit across the table from are saying, hey, when my grandparents died, they didn't do anything. And that was really hard for me. So now that I'm the decision maker, I want to have a funeral. I want to have a celebration of life. I see why that's important. And we're just starting to have that group of people sitting across the table from us. So I hope for funeral service. And that's what I tell people. A funeral doesn't have to be Amazing Grace, the body in the casket, going to the cemetery. Do something. I don't care if it is a hot air balloon ride that your family takes together in memory of your person. I don't care if you go to Target together. Do something in that person's name that gives you some sort of closure to get people together. That is what is important.
So we're talking about like a generational gap issue here, right?
Mhm.
Because what I read that article, I think it was the NFDA actually that provided it was about like the younger generation now is actually, yeah, in their poll, it was like, yeah, they want a service, right? Because it's like you said, they've experienced what it is to lose probably a grandparent or great grandparent and not have a service and notice that it makes things harder because there's no
Mhm.
closure. The problem is that these other generations, mine, Gen X, we don't know the reason for
Mhm.
to have an actual memorial service. And it
Mhm.
wasn't until like I started working closer with funeral directors that I learned, oh, wait a second, this is actually not for the deceased person.
It has nothing to do with the person
Yeah.
who died, honestly. And I tell people, I'm like, I love pre-plan. I'm a huge proponent of pre-plans, love it. But here's the deal. It is for the people that are living. It is not about what the person who died wants. And if it is, so be careful when I say that, but I could say, I want to be encased in solid gold and put in downtown Des Moines and have a giant statue of me made, which great idea. If anybody wants to do that, please do. However, for my family, it also depends on how old I am, the circumstances of my passing, all of that. I think those things come into play. I could care less what they do with me. It is what they need. And my husband is somebody, he doesn't do death well at all. He hates talking about it. He super supportive, but hates everything to do with death. And I
Interesting.
literally, my pre-plan says, call so and they will take care of it. He'll pay for it. He doesn't need to make any decisions because he won't know. But I'm just like, it's not about what I want. It's about what they need and what my kids need and my family needs and all of that. But it's there, yeah, I don't know. It's like this weird perception of when people say don't do anything, they think they're helping their family, but it's really not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're creating that space to grieve, and people don't realize that without it, you don't have it. And it's
Yep.
similar to what you went through, right?
Mhm.
You went through that and you found that out. Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the career. So you mentioned right now there's a shortage of funeral directors. It's harder to get your foot in through the door. I know that the advice to funeral homes is give them a shot, but what advice would you give to those people who are trying to get their foot in through the door?
So I have the awesome opportunity with NFDA that I get to talk to a lot of the students. We have a student arranger training session, which is my absolute favorite one to do, especially when I get to do it in person because I'm actually hearing what are these students dealing with. The conversation before and after the training is my favorite part of it. And a lot of these students, I'll tell them, if you are struggling getting hired, go and just say, can I volunteer? Can I come and job shadow? Just start being around. I had another coworker. She actually would just come and hang out and volunteer. She was a student, so she would do her embalmings at the funeral home and would go on removals. And all this, and I remember one of the managers is like, "You're not on our payroll. I thought you worked here." She's, "No, I'm just here all the time. I'm just trying to get experience." And so the more and more you can just become a familiar face, show that you can dress professionally, show that you can act professionally. That's a hard part right now, too. I think students getting in that suit and tie or that dress is it's just not always their second nature. Showing that you can be that person consistently and being there. Don't go there your first try saying, "Hey, I want to apply for a job." Maybe go say, "Hey, can I follow you around for a couple days? Can I sit in on arrangements with you? I would love to be able to see once what you guys do on a removal. Do you care if I just don't be annoying, but
Right.
just be offer yourself there, just that you're wanting to get experience. Maybe it's, "Hey, can I wash your cars? Can I help out? I want to know what it's like to wash a hearse." I don't know many funeral homes are going to say no to that. "Hey, can I just help out?" Familiarize yourself with that. Another great way is, depending on how big of a town you're in, find if there's different grief groups or kind of those subsects that are involved in funeral service. Get your name out there so that when you are applying, you can look at who your references are. And if there's somebody that's part of an active grief group or a hospice volunteer group, get your name in those circles, and that's really going to help you.
Beautiful. All right. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit. You mentioned your role in the NFDA as the arranger training instructor. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. What are some of the key like principles or practices that you emphasize in those trainings?
So the training sessions that I do with that is there's three different versions that I do. So we have an 8-hour version, which we do only in person. That is one that is for more experienced funeral directors that's marketed that way. But I love when we have students come to that because we do a lot of group work for it. And when you can have students and more experienced directors together, really we learn a lot from each other. So that's an in-person one. It always is hosted before convention, a pre-convention seminar, and then I'll go to different state associations, funeral homes that host. So just whoever wants to have me, I go out there. Then we have the 4-hour student version. That's usually through mortuary schools. We'll host for that. And then we're launching a new version in July. This is going to be the Arranger Solutions Academy. So this is going to be 4 90-minute sessions that are going to be provided Zoom. So for people that can't travel, that want to get those CE hours in, and it counts for in-person CE, which I know most of us funeral directors are like, "Oh, I need those in-person CE hours." It will count for that. So what we talk about is really just how to go through the arrangement process, how to, if you've been doing it for 10, 15 years, how to step up your game, how to think about those things that maybe you haven't thought about for a while and just freshening up your skills. So we talk about the first part is we really talk about connecting with the family and building trust. Sometimes we take for granted that people don't trust funeral directors. And I think that you take 40 years ago, a funeral director was somebody that was very trusted. There was always a lot of trust with funeral directors. That was just what position that was out there. Unfortunately, there have been people in this business that have not made our industry very trustworthy, and it's out there in the media. And those are always the stories that get blasted everywhere, not always the good ones.
Yeah.
And so sometimes just building trust before we're asking for a social security number and a check for $10,000. We need to prove who we are and the trust and why they should trust us first. So we talk about that, building that trust. We talk about how to guide families through merchandise without being a salesperson. I know that's hard to do sometimes, but how can we have those discussions? How can we be more creative with our merchandise selections and not making it like a sale? And then we talk a lot about design, which is my favorite. How can we think more outside the box, be more creative with our funerals, things like that. And then we talk a lot about support, whether it is support for like difficult families. Not every family we serve is sunshine and rainbows. In my career, I have been spit on, kicked on, my life threatened. I have been had shoes thrown at me,
Wow.
puked at, punched in the face, all these things. And so we talk about some of those difficult families because I feel like a lot of the stuff out there in funeral services right now is, oh, mom's hair isn't quite right. Okay, that's great. But let's talk about when they're threatening your life because the person on the life insurance is a girlfriend of dad's, not the wife's, and what we need
Oh,
to do. Because that's what happens. We need to talk about those tough things. So we talk about
yeah,
that. And then I also touch on the mental health crisis that with funeral directors, how do we take care of ourselves? What does that mean? And how can we just make sure that we're supporting each other within it? It's not a competition between funeral directors. We need to help each other.
absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'm gonna put on my technologist marketing hat on
Okay.
for a second because I'm just so curious about this. Have you tried to integrate AI into any of this arranger training?
A little bit, not a ton, just because I don't know that world very well. Now, my 21-year-old son all the time, but I don't know it enough. But it would be great to have a conversation with you, let you look through it and see once what that could possibly bring.
Yeah, this is something that just popped into my head right now because I definitely think that there's some great possibility there. There's one of the we had Joseph Prey on our podcast as a previous guest, and one of the things that I noticed, he was talking about all of these memorial services he had planned, and they had popcorn and this and that, and it was always similar to what you have described
Mhm.
about the person. But one of the things there are two things that I noticed that you both have actually. You're imaginative, you're creative, right? Not everyone has that. So there are people out there who have the empathetic part of it down, but they may not be that creative. And I mentioned it to him. I said, you could actually build an AI that would help with the creative part of this. So those people who are not as creative can actually leverage that and help
Mhm.
them build and plan. The other thing is that you guys are also like event planner, funeral directors. You
Mhm.
know, it's a combination of that. So yeah, I definitely think I would love to talk to you later about that. I definitely think it'd be worth experimenting with and seeing the results that you could get from that. I think it
Well,
would
it's
be cool.
interesting you say that because I'll have other funeral directors call me and be like, okay, I need Lanae's brain on this. I know I want to be creative for this. I just don't know how to be creative for this. Please
Yeah.
help.
It's
I
exactly
need
what I'm
Lanae's
talking
brain.
about, right?
Yeah, yeah. So like yeah, create Lanae's brain, creative AI. Perfect.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that balancing that you just mentioned. Your day-to-day work, both with your nonprofit, which we'll jump into real quick, and just being a funeral director. Obviously, you're dealing with death and grief on a very deep level. So I'm
Mhm.
just curious, like, how do you personally cope with the emotional weight of what you do?
This is something that has taken me a long time to get to where I'm at emotionally because I am a very empathetic person. I also get very close with my families, probably too close sometimes. But I have learned that it's to find somebody in funeral service that does not work at your firm, that is your safe person to talk to. And I say, and when I tell people that find somebody not in your firm, they're like, why not? I'm like, because then it gets gossipy. You need to have somebody, it's not about the gossipy stuff. It's about when you've had a tough family or you're struggling with your coworkers or whatever, somebody that's outside your firm, preferably outside of your state, that doesn't know the dynamic of the firm that you're at. That can be an open mind. And that can somebody, because sometimes you can like overreact in a situation. And just to have somebody from the outside source be like, you're being dumb, you're overreacting, it'll be fine. I have my person does that for me sometimes. The other thing for me, and people think I'm crazy, and I know it doesn't always work in every situation, but I actually live about 45 minutes away from the funeral home that I work at. So I live in a different town than I'm a funeral director. To me, that is the best thing that you can do. Because when I'm at my kids' sports, when I'm out for dinner with my family, if I'm out camping, I'm Lanae and I'm with my friends and family and I'm not worried about what Lanae, the funeral director, should be doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And having that distance, I know that's not, people just think, oh, I have to be a funeral director in my town. You don't have to be. You can live somewhere else than where you're practicing. And honestly, it's amazing and I love it. In my 15 years, I have served families that I know, and I'm honored that they choose for me to be their funeral director. But 90% of the families that I'm serving only know me as Lanae, the funeral director. And it makes it easier to talk about money. It makes it easier when things are really tough of how I can lay down the law and deal with some things. I don't have a personal interest in what the family does or how they act or however, because I've separated that. And truly balancing that as a funeral director, those are probably the two things that have really given me really good balance with that.
Great advice. I think
Mhm.
that's great. And it's something people should talk about a little bit more.
100%.
So, the nonprofit, the Final Salute, this is something that you founded to ensure that the unclaimed cremated remains, especially of veterans, they get the proper burials with honors. Curious what moved you to start this initiative, and what's the process of finding and laying to rest unclaimed individuals involved?
So, another thing in my life that truly happened by accident that I did not seek out to happen, it just did. In 2018, I got diagnosed with hip dysplasia, which is like the dogs, right? Like the bad hips in the dogs. Apparently,
Hmm.
humans can have that too. I had no idea that was a thing, but it is. Long story short is I had to have a series of very extensive hip reconstructive surgeries. And I had a total of 9 surgeries, and most of those surgeries required a 3-month bed rest time after each surgery. So I moved a hotel bed, moved a hospital bed into my living room. It felt like a hotel. And I was stuck. I was sitting there. I couldn't drive. I couldn't work. I couldn't anything with this broken hip. And so I had asked the owners of the funeral home and I said, please give me something to do at home. I will lose my mind. And I figured it would be like stuffing envelopes or whatever, making phone calls, whatever. I didn't care, just anything.
Keep me busy.
Please keep me busy. Otherwise, I'm going to spend way too much money on Amazon and it's not going to work out good. But so they gave me and at this point, I'd been with the funeral home for about 5 years. And they gave me a list of about 300 people's urns that were sitting in our basement. I had no idea we had all those urns. I had no clue.
Wow.
We have 6 locations. I had no idea we were sitting on that. And so I started calling people and I got a lot of oh shit, I am so sorry. I forgot. And
Oh
I got a
my.
lot of, my brother was supposed to pick my mom up. I am so sorry. He was supposed to do that. I thought he did. The blame game, however, whatever. So we were able to get a lot of them back to where they belonged or where they were supposed to be. But then we were filtering down, and I realized that there was a couple situations where either the person that was our informant when that person died, we was also on my list. So we had multiple family members, and they were the last of the family, so there wasn't anybody to come and get them. We had a few scenarios where the family said, "I don't want them. I don't care what you do with them. Not, nope, don't want them." And yeah, we were like, we're going to end up with these urns. I don't feel right with them just continuing to sit in our basement. So the first service we had for civilians, and we had 86 civilians. We were able to get a cemetery space donated to us, and we held a private service and buried them. And then we have since had 2 services for children that have gone unclaimed, which
Oh.
is hard to think about that actually happens. But we have buried 40 children that have gone unclaimed over the years. And so we also have a cemetery space and headstone for them. And then probably the biggest recognized services we do is the veterans. And the very first year we did it, we had 3 veterans. And I didn't know what to expect at all. Like I had Googled what to do with unclaimed veterans. There really wasn't anything out there at all. Like I just was like throwing this together. And so I was like, oh, we'll have a little service at the funeral home and then we'll go to this veteran cemetery because we have a beautiful veteran cemetery in Iowa. I set up like 20 chairs and I was like, oh, hopefully some people will come, put on Facebook. And then, yeah, a couple hundred people showed up. Our governor showed up. Like
Oh, wow.
everybody showed up. I had a little meltdown about it, but it was beautiful. And I just stood there like in the back thinking like, this is not what I was expecting. I, like I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that incredible turnout. And so since then, we have had a service every year. There's going to be a year, hopefully, that we don't have to do it because if we don't have to do it, it means that we're getting all of these veterans off the shelf. But every year it grows and grows. Last year was probably one of the most humbling experiences in my career as a funeral director. We had 20 veterans who were unclaimed and five spouses. They were from all five military branches. And we had veterans that served in the Vietnam War, Korean War, World War One, World War Two, and we had a Civil War veteran.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So if you look at the picture of these 20 veterans, the history that was there that day was just, yeah, it was pretty incredible.
Amazing. I'm happy to hear that's turned out that way. It's amazing. So let's talk about the future. Future goals, both your own career and the final salute. What do you feel that looks like?
It's, I always joke if I set goals, I probably won't make them because everything good in my life has happened by accident, truly. But with Final Salute, my biggest goal with that is just to really encourage and to inspire other people to do the same. We don't have to do it. It doesn't have to be a Final Salute thing. We would love to help other funeral homes. We have a great blueprint. It's no gatekeeping what we're doing. And so just to be able to inspire other funeral directors to do the same. And then for me personally, for my career, I would love to get my master's degree. I would love to be able to be more involved in teaching the next generation of funeral directors. I think it's so important that we have great influences for those students that are coming up. There are so many awesome mortuary instructors out there right now, and it's not the instructors that it used to be. They're people that don't look like old mortuary science instructors. They look like you and me and it's great and it's really exciting. And I think having those great instructors is what is going to make funeral service amazing, amazing in the next few years because their students are coming out of it excited, ready to go. They've been giving all this awesome education about what's out there. And it's not just, do you want burial or cremation?
Yeah,
That is exciting. So I would love to be able to be more a part of that as well.
I'm sure you will be. Lanae, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. I know that you gave a lot of wisdom here, and we wish you the absolute best. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.